Welcome back to Transmission on Bent TV. I'm Sammy Cameron, and today we're talking about trans laws and rights. Joining me today are Sally, Andrew and Greer. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So are trans people treated as equal in the eyes of the law? And how does the law protect trans people from discrimination and stigma?
The main area of coverage is the Federal Equal Opportunity Law that came into effect on the 1st of August 2013, which covers all gender identities, male, female, all points around, across, behind, diagonal, and gives a lot of coverage and goes further than the state law that came in 2000.
So there's a lot of protection.
Yeah, largely protected. I'd say that there are a couple of exemptions, unfortunately, but in a lot of day-to-day things, going into a shop, most employment, clubs, membership of clubs, accommodation, yes, we have to be treated equally.
If I may add to that, the practical application of that law is really evident now, that the freedom that generally we have to be able to go around into any shop, purchase any product or service is a direct result of those law changes, and I think that's really important to note.
Definitely. Could be life-saving even, I'd say, in some cases.
And employment is covered. So if you transition at work, that sort of thing is now covered and you're protected.
Yeah, so that's the legal aspect, and also the Victorian Equal Opportunity Human Rights Commission, who are a good source of information, developed some employer guidelines about a year ago, which they're due to update a bit, but they're on their website and flesh out the sort of day-to-day details of how to deal with names and pronouns and bathrooms and all those sorts of things.
But there is still a long way to go in that, because individuals, and I am aware of one where having difficulties with the transition process at work because of individuals at the hierarchy.
And I suppose smaller companies, smaller organisations are going to perhaps be more challenging than larger, higher profile organisations?
Not necessarily. This one's a fairly large organisation, and it's really sad that they're not implementing the law as it's currently is.
So what areas does the federal legislation not cover?
Both the federal and state laws have two major areas of exemption, and that's so-called competitive sporting activity, and it covers all trans and can disadvantage all of, well, pretty much everyone in a way, trans women, trans men, so that's trans women, people born with male bodies who need to live as female, trans men and people other than male or female. And the other area is exemptions for religious charities. You can't just say all of religion. If I go into a shop, they say, my religion says I can't serve you. No, that's definitely not on. But a so-called religious charity can say, well, it's our religious belief that we feel that trans people are wrong or whatever, and we can discriminate. But it's also, there's a problem, and it's often not transparent whether they want to follow that or not.
That would be affecting aged care.
That's actually the one, we'll say exemption to the exemption, which is really good. When the federal law went through last year, federally funded aged care providers cannot even use the religious excuse. And the good thing was the three main services, Uniting, Anglican and Catholic, were all quite okay with that, which is really good. So that's a great thing for our trans and GLBTI seniors to have a bit of dignity at the end.
But if you're an employee, say, at a religious school, if you're a teacher, for example, then you can be discriminated, you can be fired from your job and there's no protection.
Sadly, that's the case, trans or, again, GLBTI and others, single mothers or other things too,
And as I sort of will say, it's up to the people to apply the law. And in terms of this, we're talking about job discrimination with if you're in the job and changing, but getting a job is entirely another thing. You can never prove the discrimination. You can change your ID and therefore you can change all your employment things, but here you are at 40 changing, and where's your work history? So if you come out as trans and they're actually a bit transphobic, the employer employing you, well, you're just not going to get the job. So there's practice and there's law.
Okay. So maybe it's actually a good point to start talking about then. So we have the laws in place that protect us in many, many instances. But what about in real life when you're actually dealing with someone in a shop?
Well, in real life, I think it's been, by and large, very positive. Every place I go to, people just treat you with respect, because there's no reason not to, and that's a direct result of those changes all those years ago. And even services such as the police service, I was a passenger in a car that got booked for speeding, but the policeman was very positive and very supportive, even though he still had to issue the fine. But that's a separate issue, because we were treated just as somebody who was speeding, not somebody who was strange.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that come out of this discussion that, I agree that it is a case-by-case basis. A friend who is a teacher put on her resume after transition to female that she was a trans woman, didn't get interviews, just said woman, changed her resume, got 6 interviews immediately into job offers. And so there is, unfortunately, that's still out there. But I think that if you do feel you're experiencing discrimination in any setting, employment or anything, my strong advice would be document. The moment you think something's going wrong, make a note of it and start sending it, if it's a big company or whatever, to your HR department, or just make sure you have that evidence and say, this happened on the 13th of July and I'm documenting this on the 14th or whatever, can be really helpful.
So what sorts of organisations are out there to help people? So agree, document what's actually happening, diarise it so you've got some records. But who do you call for help? Who can actually help you? You feel discriminated against, you feel like the law has been broken. What should you do? Who should you contact?
Well, for the police, for instance, they have their GLOs, as they call them, the gay, lesbian liaison officers, who deal with the whole alphabet community, and they're the first point of contact. If you have an issue that you felt being unfairly treated by the police because you are trans, then there is a function in the police force to deal with that.
What about in employment? Who should you go to?
Who are you going to call?
Who are you going to call?
2 places to call: the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commission and the Australian Human Rights Commission. And it can be a little bit of a jurisdictional issue. Do I call the state or the federal one? But usually a quick call will sort out which is the one to go and then do a detailed complaint to. And the good thing is their processes are conciliatory and more informal, so it's not like a court where you might have to go on record. And apparently there's an 80% success rate in Victoria of reconciliation in a fair way that's a sort of win-win solution, both for the individual and that can often result in education that can prevent it happening again.
Okay. Just one last thing I wanted to cover. What's the situation for people that don't want to associate with necessarily having an M or an F on a form? So what support is there for people legally when people have to provide information?
There is now, at a federal level only, the so-called sex and gender guidelines, which are based on 2 principles, and that is get sex and gender off a form if it's not needed, because we don't ask religion or, well, football team, or is that the same thing? But, because it's not necessary. But if it is needed, then it must be based on affirmed identity, including other than male or female as an option.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Sally, Andrew and Greer for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Sammy Cameron on transmission for Vent TV. Look forward to seeing you next time.